From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Onyato.
Hello and welcome. Supreme Court dismisses appeal by Heineken Lokwobere challenging David Lyon as the candidate of the All Progressives Congress in the November 16 governorship election in Bayelsa State. President Buhari meets with executive committee members of Nigerians in Ethiopia, restates his administration's determination to combat and defeat banditry and terrorism in the country. President of the Nigeria Labour Congress calls on the federal government to take decisive action to tackle insecurity as Catholic bishops in Kaduna demand sack of service chiefs at the burial of slain cemeterian. And World Health Organization officially renames the new coronavirus as COVID-19 as death toll from the disease rises to over 1,000. Plus, business, sports, news from Abuja, the FCT, and of course, later on, we'll head off to our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's January inflation rate expected to hit 12% in latest survey by financial derivatives company.
And on sports news tonight, Barcelona confirmed that France international Ousmane Dembele will be sidelined for 6 months following surgery on a serious hamstring tear.
From Abuja, Professor of International Jurisprudence Akin Oyebode advocates a new constitution produced by a constituent assembly as part of measures to address the nation's numerous challenges.
An attempt by an All Progressives Congress aspirant, Senator Heineken Lokwobere, to overturn Mr. David Lyon's election as Bayelsa State Governor has been thrown out by the Supreme Court. Senator Lokwobere had filed an appeal at the Apex Court challenging the nomination of Mr. Lyon as the APC flag bearer in the November the 16th governorship election in the state. But in a unanimous decision, Justice Johnny Yang-Okoro, who delivered the lead judgment, held that Senator Lokwobere failed to file his suit within the mandatory 14 days stipulated in the 1999 Constitution.
The journey to the government house in Bayelsa State for Mr. David Lyon appears to have been stamped as the Supreme Court threw out the appeal filed by Senator Heineken Lokwobere, challenging his nomination as a candidate of the All Progressives Congress. The Apex Court, in a unanimous decision, dismissed the appeal filed by Senator Heineken Lokwobere, challenging the nomination of Lyon as the APC flag bearer in the November 16 governorship poll. The court, in the lead judgment delivered by Justice John Yang-Okoro, held that Senator Lokwobere failed to file his suit within the mandatory 14 days stipulated in the 1999 Constitution. Justice Okoro stated that the provisions of Section 285, subsection 9 of the 1999 Constitution was categorical and emphatic that all political cases must be instituted within a 14-day time frame from when the cause of action arises. The appellant filed his suit 24 hours outside the time allowed by law for him to do so. While the lawyer to the appellant was unavailable for comment, lawyers to the APC and Mr. Lyon applaud the verdict of the court.
Well, the implication of the judgment is that the pre-election matter challenging the nomination and sponsorship of Chief David Lyon as the lawful candidate of the All Progressive Congress in the November election has been affirmed by the court. The court has held that there was no proper challenge because the lawsuit filed by Senator Heineken Lokwobere was filed outside the prescribed period provided by the Constitution.
What we take away from this decision is the fact that the Supreme Court at this point has settled the question of whether the Interpretation Act generally applies to the provision of Section 2859 with respect to election matters. That issue has been finally settled by this decision.
The appellant, Senator Lokwobere, had prayed the Apex Court to void the decisions of both the trial court and the appellate court in Port Harcourt, which held that his case was statute barred and no longer has life as at the time it was instituted. The former Minister of State for Agriculture averred that the two lower courts erred in law when they held that he ought to have filed his grievances from the date the result of the primary election was announced, and not from the date his opponent's name was submitted to the electoral body.
And staying with legal matters, the trial of the convener of the Revolution Now protest, Mr. Amoyele Sowore, resumes at the Federal High Court in Abuja on Wednesday, February the 12th, 2020. Justice Ijoma Ojukwu had on December the 6th, 2019, adjourned the matter to February the 11th, 12th and 13th for definite hearing. But the court did not sit today due to the absence of Justice Ojukwu, who is sitting outside the division. Mr. Sowore and co-defendant Olawale Bakari are facing trial over charges of treasonable felony for organizing the Revolution Now protest on August the 5th, 2019. He was arrested on August the 3rd, 2019 by the Department of State Services and was in custody until December the 24th, 2019. The defendants were eventually released on orders of the Attorney General of the Federation, who directed the DSS to comply with the orders of the court that granted them bail. And now to security. President Muhammadu Buhari has reiterated his administration's determination to combat and defeat all acts of criminality, banditry and terrorism in the country. A statement from the presidency says President Buhari gave this assurance at a meeting with the executive committee members of the Nigerian community in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He appealed to all Nigerians to support and cooperate with security agencies who are ready to defend and preserve the unity of the country. The meeting, moderated by the chairman CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabire-Rewa, also observed a minute's silence in honor of travelers killed by Boko Haram terrorists on Monday in Borno State. The president gave Nigerians, both home and abroad, the assurance that their protection would continue to remain a priority of his administration, besides fighting corruption and bringing prosperity. On doing business in Ethiopia, the president confirmed that he had been briefed on the challenges faced by some Nigerian companies with investments in the country. While responding to a request on the issue of diaspora voting, President Buhari affirmed that he was in support of it, but legislation was required to make it a reality. Meanwhile, the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Mr. Ayuba Waba, is not impressed with the security situation and is calling for an immediate overhaul of the nation's security architecture. Comrade Waba insists that it's deceptive for anyone to claim that the current security architecture is on course. According to the Labour leader, who spoke at the 4th Delegate Conference of the National Association of Academic Technologists in Abuja, the state of insecurity in the country requires the government taking decisive steps.
If we are able to end the civil war, which started in 1967, and it ended in 1970, this issue of insurgency started in 2009, and today we are in 2020. Yet we couldn't actually put it to an end. I think there is a problem, and we need to look at it, because the issue is really affecting many communities, many lives, and many people. Nobody is actually safe in this type of situation. And that's why even flights, for you to book your flight to Maiduguri, maybe you have to do it within a week, because all the elites now are now flying. It's only the poor and the vulnerable that is actually on the road. And therefore our country has been desecrated with the blood of the innocent, because all those people being killed are innocent. This is not a situation that will take lightly. It's a situation that will continue to make the clarion call that what needs to be done should be done. And therefore this whole story of sympathy and also saying that we are on course, I think with what is happening, it's clear that we are not on course, and we need a new strategy.
Meanwhile, lack of confidence in the nation's security architecture is also shared by Catholic bishops, who are also asking the federal government to declare a state of emergency on the nation's security and replace the service chiefs. The Catholic bishops have also challenged the federal government to come up with new strategies to protect citizens who are being killed endlessly. The Archbishop of the Kaduna Diocese, Most Reverend Matthew Ndagoso, who spoke at the burial of a murdered seminarian, Michael Nnadi, says the nation cannot afford to lose any more citizens to insurgents, kidnapping and banditry.
What is happening in our country today? There are symptoms of a near failed state. And I don't know, miss worse. where the citizens cannot sleep with their eyes closed. People cannot go about their normal businesses. Things are falling apart. And so, I mean, we have people in government who, in our name, have been entrusted with our resources to take care of us, to protect us, to save us. And so, I mean, Michael is only one, you know, of the hundreds Nigerians that are being killed daily. It is simply because he's a seminarian and he died here in an institution. That's why the world is knowing about him. There are hundreds and hundreds of Nigerians who die like flies, and nobody hears about them. I don't tell the president what to do, but I think, given where we are, and given for the last how many years now, I mean, it is not even good for the morale of our young officers. If their tenure has come, look at now, by the time these people retire, only God knows what will happen to young officers who have the dream, you know, and therefore, for 2 terms. And I definitely, I dare say, they may have run out of ideas. And therefore, there's need for a serious rejigging of the security apparatus that we have in the country.
With only 10 years to go to the SDG deadline, many barriers still stand in the way of achieving its goals here in Nigeria. In this report, our correspondent Mary Alala Yusuf looks at where the country stands in the race to achieve Goal 3, which is good health and well-being for all come 2030.
A few of the numerous markers of health include maternal and under-5 mortality rates, the incidence of infectious diseases, and progress towards universal health coverage. There's been a steady decline in maternal and child mortality ratios since 2008. But in 2017, there were an estimated 3.5 million more malaria cases over 2016 in the 10 highest burden African countries, Nigeria included. Experts believe that if more Nigerians would sleep under insecticide-treated nets and report to hospitals and clinics for rapid diagnostic tests, the trend could be reversed. News about polio and HIV/AIDS infections is more cheery.
About 80-something% have achieved viral suppression or thereabout. So, as far as HIV is concerned, there's a lot to roll out. There's the political will and commitment to keep rolling through our partners. And the government needs to do some more to meet up its own commitments to that, you know. But for other infectious diseases, it's not so successful yet. For TB, I know tuberculosis also has a target that by 2030, they should also reduce, they should want to have no cases of tuberculosis, no TB by 2030. They have targets at 2025, 2030, and 2035. And so far, Nigeria is still the 6th highest burden country with TB in the world.
Another threat to the sector is the issue of brain drain, and it appears there is no segment unaffected.
Many nurses have left the country just because of the remuneration is poor, lack of recognition by the government. The ratio to nurses, the WHO ratio is 1:4. But a situation whereby one nurse knows about 20 to 30 patients is something else.
Lagos State is determined to address the problem with modern tools.
We need more medical professionals. Our ratios are very poor, but people are attracted to other climes. So how do we attract people back? E-health is one way that we can leverage resources we have both here and outside.
Experts say that a strong indication that goals can be achieved would be the country's ability and willingness to wean herself off foreign aid. This might be difficult considering that current allocation of funds to the health sector is still below the recommended 15% of the national budget. Some targets are to reduce maternal and under-5 mortality to less than 70 deaths per 100,000 live births and 25 per 1,000 live births respectively, as well as to end the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria worldwide. Mary Alala Yusuf, Channels Television News.
In part 2, after the break, explosion rocks the home of the factional scribe of the APC in Edo State. That's coming up in a moment. Do stay with us.